The next two lectures we're going to be talking about soil biology. And soil biology is really interesting because of the diversity and the complexity of different organisms in the soil. This first lecture is going to be kind of an introduction to the types of organisms that we deal with and what they look like, how they act, and their importance and role in soil science. This graphic right here is just an illustration of the diversity and complexity of the different soil organisms. If you look on the far left, and this is kind of a size chart, what you're looking at on the bottom is a clay particle or a clay crystal, and you guys know that the clay particles are the smallest of the soil particles. Well, in comparison, a bacteria is about that size. They're actually individually a little bit smaller, and depending on what type and what part of the bacteria we're talking about, they can be quite small. The fungi, on the other hand, are a bit bigger. Okay, you can see their size and shape in relation to a silt particle. Okay, there's also protozoa and algae that kind of fall in that same category of size. Okay, about the same size as a silt particle. And then lastly, in the sand realm, we've got different types of worms. We've got arthropods or bugs. Excuse me. And we've got most of the biology that's in the sand-sized particle range we can see. So again, lots of different size and shape. Now in the soil, there is a huge population density and a huge diversity. So think about this for a second. In this table, I've got listed soil bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and so on. Look at how many bacteria there might be in a cubic inch of soil. If you think about a cubic inch, that's not very big, right? But there are there can be up to 180 million bacteria in that 1 inch cube. Okay, fungi, not quite as many. However, the fungi are quite a bit bigger than the bacteria. And so if you look at this on a scale of pounds per acre, there tends to be a lot of fungi weight in the soil. The other ones are protozoa, nematodes, arthropods, and earthworms. Now, one of these that really enters into the conversation in agriculture is nematodes, because a lot of the time we'll have problems with them. And so even though they don't make up a lot in terms of numbers in the soil, and even their weight doesn't tend to be a lot of the soil, the damage that they can do is significant, and so they can't be ignored. And so think about that. If something as insignificant as a nematode can cause so much damage, really the soil biology is something that we have to take into consideration. There's also an extensive diversity in especially in species shown by different things. Okay, what do their metabolic activities tell us about the different organisms that are in the soil? This means, how do they get their energy? How do they use their energy? What are the products of their energy? Those are the metabolic activities. What are their morphologies? Okay, there's a myriad of sizes and shapes and types of different organisms, and even within a single class, there's several different types of bacteria and fungi. They're all different. None of them are hardly the same, and so the diversity is vast. They have different genetic makeups, and also, how they live their life is also very different. Okay, we might have bugs that last several months, where a fungi or a bacteria, depending on how it lives, it could last quite a long time, or maybe it's only very shortly lived. So all these things are considerations and show us really the complexity and the diversity of the different species of soil. We try to use different isolation methods, and the reason that we do this is within a bacteria, using these different isolation methods, we can isolate easily 20 to 50 different phenotypes, okay? And that's just in the bacteria. That's easy to do. We've got different nutrient cycling properties that these critters have. So bacteria and fungi are important in plant decomposition, and part of plant decomposition, we'll talk about it in the future, is the nitrogen cycle. They play a huge role in that. They play a huge role in carbon cycling, in CO2 cycling, in phosphorus cycling, sulfur cycling. All of these different cycles are mediated by the different organisms. They can degrade plant materials, they can degrade fertilizers, they can degrade insecticides and herbicides. So they play a role in that as well. And then some of them are called saprophytic and some are called pathogenic. So pathogenic ones are the ones that really cause us problems, and saprophytic ones, these saprophytes are the ones that consume dead and dying organic matter. So where a pathogen will feed on something that's living, a saprophyte will live on something that's already dead. They have different interactions between other microorganisms, okay? So sometimes the fungi and the nematode will have a spat and start eating each other. Sometimes the bacteria will feed on amoebas. There's interactions among all of them, and that's another thing that makes them quite diverse. And there's good and bad in each instance. We've got good and bad bacteria. We've got good and bad fungi. There are good and bad nematodes. So all these different interactions are important. Now what you're looking at here is kind of the soil energy pyramid. And if you will for a second, let's start at the bottom with photosynthesis. Okay, you guys all know what photosynthesis is. This is where plants take energy from the sun, convert it to food for themselves, and the different players in this realm are the plants and lichens. These are the ones that use photosynthesis, okay? And we call these things the producers, okay? They'll take photosynthesis and produce something, plant material or some kind of body. Now those producers are often fed on, okay? And they're fed on by these consumers, and those consumers include bacteria, fungi, nematodes, springtails, also called collembola, and worms. And then lastly, these consumers are fed on by predators. And the different types of predators can be protozoa, nematodes, mites, and beetles. Okay, so this is kind of how the flow of the who eats who in the soil biology works. We start out with photosynthesis, and the guys at the top of the food chain are the predators. Now the predators and the consumers are important because they'll take the plant material, the lichens, and the moss, they'll eat them, or they'll eat what's eating them, and digest them. And in the process, that releases nutrients for those plants to then take up. So you kind of see the cyclical nature of this thing. And it's complex, okay? We've got nematodes that feed on plants, but we've also got saprophytic fungi, okay? Remember, these are the guys that are feeding on the dead plants. There are collembola, which are springtails. These guys help with soil structure. And there's bacteria, but all these things can play a significant role in the life of the other. So, for example, we've got a plant-feeding nematode that is feeding on plants, but at the same time there's different nematodes that trap fungi. And all these things, you can see that he's eating on that, he's eating on that, and maybe he's feeding on the fungi, and he's feeding on, or the mites are eating the nematodes. There's just a complex web of interactions in the soil. Okay, so one of the types of organisms are arthropods. Okay, and there's several different varieties. There's predators, there's shredders, there's herbivores, there's fungal feeders. All these are different but important. Okay, shredders are especially important in cases where we have a lot of crop residue, because what they're able to do is to take that crop residue and physically break it down, and that aids in nutrient cycling. Okay, and these are the herbivores that are eating on the plants. But there's also types of arthropods that'll feed on fungi, and so I'm going to show you a few pictures of different arthropods. This one's called a tiger beetle. Okay, this is a bigger one. This is one that we'll be able to see in the soil. He's pretty small, but we'd probably be able to see him with a hand lens or something like that. Okay. Here is a pseudoscorpion. Okay, they call him that because he doesn't have much of a tail, but you can kind of see that he kind of looks like a scorpion. He's got the pinchers on the front. Okay, this is another type of arthropod. This is a type of mite right here. I'm trying to remember the name on this. I think he's called a dot, some type of dot, because he's got this dot on his back right here. But anyway, in this case, this is a predator right here because what he's eating right here is a springtail. Okay, so this is a predator feeding on a springtail, which is usually considered a consumer. This is a 3 to 5 millimeter size, so this is something that we can probably see with our eye. Okay, here's a picture of a symphilan. Okay, this guy feeds on plant roots, and actually can be a real problem in potatoes because he likes to eat tubers as well. However, what you're looking at here is this big guy down here. I'm sorry, I advanced the slide and I can't go back now. But if you can go back and look at it, what you're looking at is there is a mite that's feeding on that tuber feeder. Okay, and so in that case, that's a mite that we really want to have around because he'll be able to destroy that bug that's trying to eat our potatoes. Okay. The shredders are important, like I said before, because they can physically break down the residue. Okay, and by doing so, they also have a nice habitat in their gut for bacteria. Okay, and that bacteria can further break down what they're feeding on, and what this does is it enhances the soil structure, and it's a means of nutrient release. So, very important, these organisms, the shredders. Here's a mite that feeds on fungi. Okay, very small guy here and very ugly, but important fungal feeder. Here the springtail. This is a picture or an image of the springtails when they're still in their larval state, and when they get a little bit older, they have a tail that is kind of like it's almost like a lever. And when they grow up, they use that lever to kind of move around. So what I want you to do is watch this video on YouTube, and you'll probably have to type this into your browser. But this video shows the life of a springtail and how far they can jump, and it's just amazing what these little guys can do. So watch this, and it's the springtails are important in breaking down plant residue. They're important in aiding with soil structure and that kind of thing. So very, very significant. Okay, Enchytriads. These are a roundworm. They're actually called a potworm. And the difference they have from regular earthworms is they don't have that segmented body. And you can see here in this picture that they're kind of a straight, there's no segments in their bodies. They tend to be kind of see-through. So if you look through these guys, what they're feeding on is organic matter. And you can kind of see that organic matter, that dark stuff in their gut. Okay? These also feed on bacteria and fungi too. And not coincidentally, there tends to be a lot of bacteria and fungi in organic matter. So that's what they're feeding on. Okay, something that you've all probably seen, whether you knew it or not, is next time you are walking around, maybe on your lawn or in an area that has been kind of wet, you'll see these a lot. And what these are, sometimes you'll see little mounds on top of the soil, and they just look like soil. But what they are, in non-technical terms, is worm crap. Okay? And the technical term for them are worm castings. So what the earthworms do is similar to the potworms. What they'll do is they'll ingest the soil, and they like to do this at the surface because the soil organic matter tends to be highest at the surface. And that's what they feed on, is the organic matter. So they'll ingest soil with a lot of organic matter in it. They'll use some of the nutrients out of that soil, and then they'll excrete it through their behind. And what we're left with are these castings, and they're at the surface because if the volume their body occupies dictates that their crap has to go somewhere, and so it goes out. Here's a picture of the all too common earthworm, good for fishing too, I hear. Now these earthworm casts, they're fantastic because they're rich in nutrients, they help the soil structure, and then the physical action of the worm burrowing in the soil can increase, or enhance the soil structure. Okay, so what you're looking at here on this table is, on the right hand side, we've kind of got this soil with a pH and an organic matter percent. And then what the research here is that we took earthworm casts out of that field, and you can see that the pH level went up. Okay, 5.2 is pretty acidic, and after it passed through the gut of the worm, it was about 6. So that's good. The organic matter, it started out at about 3%, and after the worm had got through with it, the organic matter percentage had actually increased. And it does this because it's basically concentrating the soil. Okay, the nitrate and ammonium levels go up, as well as the phosphorus and potassium. Okay, so earthworm casts tend to be enrichers in the soil. Okay, let's talk about the bad guys right now. These are nematodes, and the ones that we worry about are the plant parasitic nematodes. And what you're looking at here is a nematode that's burrowing into probably a plant root. The problem with this is twofold. Number one, this nematode tends to sap the root of its energy. And the other thing that happens is where he's burrowed in and made this hole right here, that can get infected, and that causes the plants lots of problems. So these plant parasitic nematodes are awful. However, there are different types of nematodes. There are the type that feed on bacteria. There are some that feed on fungi, and then there are other nematodes that feed on other nematodes. Okay. Now, in agriculture, like I said, we're worried about the plant parasitic types of nematodes. The way that we control for nematodes, there's several ways we can do it, but the most common is we use fumigants. Okay, fumigants are great because they go in and they'll completely wipe out a nematode population. However, the fumigants are not they're not specific enough that they can go out and pick out bad nematodes and good nematodes, because there's good nematodes in the soil too that we don't they're probably doing us some good. But these fumigants, you'll go in and really you'll wipe out a huge portion of the soil biology. That's all of it. We're wiping out bacteria, fungi, we're wiping out protozoans, and nematodes as well. And so it's really kind of you kind of have to weigh it. Okay, what if I don't apply a fumigant? Okay, if you don't, you're probably going to have some sort of crop damage because of nematodes. And if you do apply a fumigant, you have to consider that your soil biology is probably going to suffer because of it. Now, over time, it will bounce back. The good guys will come back, but the bad guys will come back too. But it's just kind of a judgment call that you have to weigh as a grower. There are different methods. There's things called biofumigants, and you've probably seen these. A lot of the time, what they'll do is in a wheat potato rotation. After the wheat's grown, they'll plant in mustard and allow it to grow, and then in the late fall they'll turn onto the mustard. And the mustard contains a chemical compound called glucosinolate. And these glucosinolates, the nematodes find them offensive. And so without applying a chemical fumigant, you can cut down on the nematode population. It's not perfect, and in fact a lot of guys will do both. They'll grow a mustard and also chemical fumigate. So anyway, there's different means for control. This video right here, again, you'll probably have to type this into your browser, but this is a picture of a predatory nematode. And so what you're going to watch is a nematode murdering another nematode. This is pretty cool. These are the kinds of nematodes that we like to have in our fields because they eat the bad guys and don't tend to bother our plants a lot. When they do bother our plants, here are some of the outcomes. Okay, in the top left, what you're looking at there is a root hair, and we have some nematodes that have embedded themselves in. It's not a root hair, excuse me. It's just a plain old root. But what they've done is they've burrowed into that root, and you can see the infections and the damage that they've caused on that root. On the right, on the top right, that's a potato that you can actually see the hole where the nematode has burrowed into the tuber, and it causes lesions and scarring on the potato tuber. And on the bottom left is a field where nematodes have come in, damaged the roots and tubers, and so the plant growth is really poor. Lastly, on the bottom right, that's kind of a small root where the nematode is burrowed in, and that dark red to brown looking tissue is diseased because the nematode went in there and the root was infected. So very bad. They cause lots and lots of damage every year, and so that's why we have to control these things. Let's talk about protozoa for a minute. There's three different types in the soil. There's ciliates, there's amoebas, and flagellates. And the way these things are classified generally is by their size and how they move around. So a ciliate, this is kind of a larger type of protozoa, and they have kind of a hair-like structure called a cilia, and that's how they move around. And these guys tend to eat other protozoa and bacteria. Now the amoeba, this is it kind of looks like a blob. I've got a picture of one that I'll show you in a minute. But these guys are also pretty large, and they move around by a pseudopod, and that's a temporary foot. Okay, and in the amoebas, there's two different types. There's a testate, and this is a amoeba that has a shell-like covering, and then there's the naked, where obviously that shell is missing. Flagellates, these are the smallest of the three, and they kind of have a whip-like structure called a flagella that they move around with. So here's a picture of a protozoa. Okay, this is a ciliate type of protozoa. You can see those hair structures. Here is an amoeba. Okay, this guy feeds on bacteria. So this is kind of the blob. And here's another type of amoeba. And this is kind of a... I don't know if this animation's coming through on your slideshow or not. But this is an animation. What you see is the amoeba on the left. And he's attacking this cell to the right. Kind of like... And this is called a vampire amoeba. Okay, where he's actually sucking the life out of that. I don't know what he's eating on there. If it's a different protozoa, it's probably a different type of amoeba or protozoa that he's eating on. So that's a vampire amoeba. Very cool. So another kind of problem. Well, another problem that we see in agriculture is a fungus called Takal. Okay, and this is a very bad fungus. It's common in wheat, and what it does is it'll get into the root system and really cause some damage. And there are protozoans. Okay, and here's a name of a certain protozoa. It'll go in, and what you're looking at here is the structure of the fungus. Okay. And these protozoans will come in and damage the fungi and feed on it. So this is kind of another example of biocontrol of an amoeba on Takal. Here's just another image of these different soil organisms that's been blown up. Bacteria, remember, are really small. And so the bacteria are these little tiny structures down here, where the fungi tend to have these long, strandy, they're kind of a stringy type of structure, and they're a little bit bigger than the bacteria. So those are the fungi. So there's a huge range of physical and chemical conditions in the soil that affect bacteria and fungi populations. And we're not going to get into that a whole lot, other than to say that most of the soil biology lives in the top 24 inches of soil. And really, as you head up the soil profile, you have increasing populations. So in the top 6 inches, you're going to have more soil biology than between 18 and 24 inches. Okay. And the reason that is because most of the nutrients, most of the organic matter, most of the air, they've got to have. Most of them have to have some sort of oxygen exchange. They're going to live in that top 6 inches of soil. Okay, that's where their habitat's at. Now, this top. Also, I need to point out a term right here called rhizosphere. Okay. And what rhizo means is Latin for root, and sphere is sphere. We know what sphere is. What this is it's the area around the root. Okay, this area around the roots, there are root exudates. There's food for them. This is a hotbed for soil bacteria, rather soil biology. Okay. So some of the soil characteristics that are conducive to microbial habitat are soil organic matter. There's the soil condition. Is it compacted? Is it tight? Or is it nice and loose? The texture, moisture, aeration, and temperature. Okay. One thing that's important, and we're going to talk about carbon and nitrogen in just a few lectures here, but the soil biology contributes to the soil carbon and nitrogen pools, and so it actually tends to be quite a bit of microbial biomass in the soil, and that's what that little graphic or the table on the right is showing, is that although they're small and don't take up a lot of space, these soil microorganisms play a huge role in our soil fertility. So among the different soil organisms, we have different types depending on what kind of temperature they like. So there's cryophiles. These are organisms that tend to do well when soil temperatures are low. Okay, and then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have thermophiles. These are soil microorganisms that enjoy hot temperatures. And then in the middle are mesophiles. So what you're looking at on that top graph right there is that these things, as they grow, they put off CO2. Okay, and you can see that these cryophiles at a low temperature, that's where they're putting off the most CO2. And so we say that they like low soil temperatures. Whereas the thermophiles, they're really not doing their best until things get really hot. Okay, and when things get really hot, that's when they're putting off the most CO2. And then mesophiles, these are the guys in the middle, and they kind of like a not too hot, not too cold type of environment. We need to talk about aerobic and anaerobic bacteria and organisms. So aerobic means that they like oxygen. Anaerobic means that they like no oxygen. Okay, and so what this graph is showing you right here, 0, this is where we say that the soil is saturated. And so actually as you move left here, the soil is drying out. And so the aerobic organisms, they like things to be, fairly moist, but not too wet. Okay? They also don't like it when things get too dry. Whereas these anaerobic guys, if the soil is really dry, they're not doing anything. But once the soil gets saturated, then bam, they start to put off a lot of CO2 and they're doing well. So those are the anaerobic bacteria. And so all these different things can play a role in the type, the number, and the diversity of organisms that we have in the soil. Okay, crop rotation, residue management. If there's no residue, we don't tend to get a lot of soil biology. If there's too much tillage, it kind of breaks up their habitat and they don't like it. Fertilization can be good and bad, depending on if the soil microbes have enough food to eat, then fertilization doesn't really affect them. But if they don't, just like a plant, these microorganisms can use fertilizers. We talked about fumigation a little bit, in that fumigation can destroy a lot of the soil microbiology. And then also pesticides, they play a role in cycling the actual chemical pesticides. And also they can be a little bit detrimental to the soil microbes as well. We spray for fungi quite often, not as much for bacteria, but the science there is improving, and a lot of these new chemicals that we have available are really targeted, okay? And so they can target a specific bug or a specific pathogen. And so really the sky's the limit. Okay, the next lecture we're going to talk about soil biology processes in the soil.